You're sitting there right now, your heart heavy with memories that won't let go. Those moments replay in your mind like a broken record, the laughter you once shared, the dreams you built together, the comfort of familiarity. And somewhere deep inside, a voice whispers, maybe this time it will be different. But let me tell you something profound. That voice isn't wisdom speaking, it's fear. Fear masquerading as hope. I've stood where you're standing. That magnetic pull backward, drawing you toward what's comfortable, what's known. It feels safe, doesn't it? Like slipping into an old pair of shoes. They might be worn and damaged, but at least you know exactly where they pinch. But here's the truth that's going to shake you to your core. Every time you go back to a relationship that once broke you, you're not just reopening old wounds. You're creating new ones. You're telling yourself a story about who you are and what you deserve that becomes more deeply ingrained with each return. Think about the last time you watered a dead plant. You poured in time, energy, hope. But what grew? Nothing. Because no amount of care can revive something that's completed its journey in your life. That relationship you're thinking about right now, it's your dead plant. And you're standing there with your watering can wondering why nothing's growing. Let me share something that changed everything for me. I was sitting in my car outside my ex's house, key in the ignition, rehearsing all the reasons why this time would be different. My hand was literally on the door handle. Then it hit me like a thunderbolt. I wasn't afraid of losing them. I was afraid of losing the person I used to be when I was with them. I was clinging to a version of myself that no longer existed. That's what we're really doing when we go back. Trying to resurrect a moment in time that's long gone. It's like trying to step into the same river twice. The water's different, you're different, everything's different. But we convince ourselves that if we just try hard enough, want it badly enough, we can turn back time. Here's what nobody tells you about going back to old relationships. It's not just about the relationship itself. It's about betraying your own growth. Every time you've been apart, you've changed, you've evolved, you've learned new truths about yourself, developed new dreams, grown in ways you might not even realize. Going back isn't just returning to an old relationship, it's returning to an old version of yourself that no longer fits who you've become. You're sitting there thinking about the good times, aren't you? The moments that shine so bright in your memory, they blind you to everything else. But remember, this nostalgia is a beautiful liar. It's a highlight reel that edits out all the tears, the sleepless nights, the moments you felt smaller than you really are. Let me ask you something that might make you uncomfortable. If you met this person today exactly as they are now, would you choose them? Not the memory of them, not the potential you once saw in them, but the actual person they are right now. Take a moment. Let that question sink in, because here's what I know with absolute certainty. The universe doesn't bring people back into your life because you're meant to be together. Sometimes they come back to show you how much you've grown, to make sure you've learned the lesson you needed to learn. When you keep going back, you're not just recycling a relationship. You're recycling your pain. You're telling the universe you haven't learned what it's trying to teach you. And the universe is patient. It will keep giving you the same lesson in different forms until you finally understand. Think about your future self for a moment. Picture them standing in front of you, looking back at this exact moment. What would they tell you? Would they thank you for going back again, for giving it one more try? Or would they wish they could shake you, wake you up to your own worth? I see people in the audience nodding, some wiping away tears. You know exactly what I'm talking about, don't you? That moment when you're alone, truly alone, and you can hear your inner voice so clearly, it's like a shout. That voice that says, you deserve more than this. But then the phone rings, or a message comes in, and that voice gets drowned out by the familiar symphony of maybe this time. Let me tell you what happens when you finally listen to that voice, when you finally honor your own growth enough to stay away. The world doesn't end. In fact, it begins. It begins in ways you never imagined possible. Those spaces that feel so empty right now, they're not empty. They're clear. Clear for new experiences, new growth, new love that aligns with who you've become. You don't miss them. You miss who you were with them. You miss the dream you had, the future you imagined. But that future was like a mirage in the desert. The closer you got, the more it disappeared, leaving you thirstier than before. Every time you're tempted to go back, you're standing at a crossroads. One path leads back to familiar pain, comfortable disappointment, and the slow death of your dreams, the other path. It's uncertain, it's scary, and it's exactly where you need to go. Here's the beautiful truth. The love you're looking for, the connection you're craving, it exists. But it will never be found in the backward glance. It's waiting for you in the forward gaze, in the courage to say, I choose myself. I choose my growth. I choose my future. Right now, in this moment, you have a choice. You can keep dancing with the ghosts of relationships past, or you can step into the light of your own worth. You can keep trying to fix what's broken, or you can open your hands and let the pieces fall, making room for something whole. Something extraordinary happens when you finally close that door. Not just push it shut, but lock it, seal it, and throw away the key. At first, the silence is deafening. The absence feels like a physical presence. Your phone feels heavier in your pocket, knowing you won't see that name light up the screen anymore. But in that silence, in that space, something magical begins to happen. You start to hear your own voice again. Not the voice that makes excuses for someone else's behavior. Not the voice that diminishes your worth to fit into someone else's story. Your true voice, the one that's been waiting patiently to be heard. Let me tell you about power. Real power. It's not in changing someone else. It's not in trying one more time, giving one more chance, or making one more compromise. Real power lies in the moment you look in the mirror and say, I love you enough to stop letting you walk back into what hurt you. You see, we've got this all backward. We think going back shows strength, that it demonstrates our capacity for forgiveness, our depth of love, but often it's the opposite. Going back is easy, it's familiar. It's like following a script, you know by heart. The real strength, the real courage, that's in walking away. That's in choosing the unknown over the familiar. Think about the message you send to the universe when you keep accepting less than you deserve. It's like putting a big sign on your forehead that says, this is all I think I'm worth. And the universe, in its infinite wisdom, will keep matching that energy. It will keep sending you variations of the same lesson until you finally stand up and declare, no more, I deserve better. Every time you go back to a relationship that doesn't serve your highest good, you're not just settling for less. You're actively choosing less. You're saying no to all the possibilities that could be waiting for you. You're saying no to growth, to adventure, to true partnership. You're saying no to yourself. But I can hear some of you thinking, but what if they've changed? What if this time is different? Let me ask you something. If someone shows you who they are repeatedly and you refuse to believe them, who's really responsible for your pain? The person being who they've always been, or you for expecting them to be someone they're not? There's this beautiful concept I want to share with you. In Japanese art, there's a practice called kintsugi, where they repair broken pottery with gold. The idea isn't to hide the breaks, but to highlight them, to make them part of the object story. Your breaks, your wounds from past relationships, they're not something to hide. They're not something to be ashamed of. They're the gold in your story. They show where you've been broken and how magnificently you've healed. But here's the crucial part. Kintsugi only works when you stop breaking the pottery again and again. You can't keep going back to what broke you and expect to heal. The gold needs time to set. Your heart needs time to heal. Your soul needs time to remember its own worth. Let's talk about the story you tell yourself about why you keep going back. Maybe it's about time invested. We've been through so much together. Maybe it's about fear. What if I never find anyone else? Maybe it's about comfort. At least I know what to expect. These stories, they're just that, stories. And you have the power to write a new one. The truth is, staying away isn't about being strong all the time. It's about being real with yourself. It's about acknowledging that, yes, sometimes you miss them. Yes, sometimes you wonder what if. Yes, sometimes the loneliness feels like it might swallow you whole. But it's also about understanding that feelings aren't facts. Missing someone doesn't mean you should be with them. Loneliness isn't a good enough reason to compromise your work. Here's what no one tells you about maintaining boundaries with past relationships. The strength doesn't come from not wanting to go back. The strength comes from not going back even when you want to. It comes from sitting with the discomfort, feeling all the feelings, and still choosing yourself. Think about all the energy you've spent trying to make wrong relationships right. The mental gymnastics, the emotional labor, the constant adaptation of yourself to fit someone else's mold. What if you took all that energy and invested it in your... What if you redirected all that love, all that patience, all that understanding towards your own growth? The relationship you have with yourself sets the tone for every other relationship in your life. When you keep going back to something that diminishes you, you're telling yourself a story about your worth. You're setting a precedent. You're establishing what you'll accept, not just from them, but from every... Let me share a powerful truth with you. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to let them go. Not because you hate them, but because you love yourself more, not because you don't care, but because you care enough about your own growth to know when something... The universe has an amazing way of making space for what's meant for you, but only after you clear out what isn't. It's like trying to fill a cup that's already full. There's no room for the new until you empty out the old. Every time you go back to an old relationship, you're filling your cup with stale water, leaving no room for fresh springs to flow into your life. This journey of staying away, of honoring your growth, is not a straight line. Some days you'll feel invincible, like you could conquer the world. Other days, the temptation to reach out will feel like a physical ache in your chest. Both of these experiences are valid. Both are part of the process. The key isn't to not feel the pull, it's to feel it and choose differently anyway. Every person who's ever truly transformed their life has faced this moment. The moment when they realized that comfort and growth cannot coexist. The moment when they understood that to become who they're meant to be, they must release who they've been. That's where you are right now, in that sacred space between who you were and who you're becoming. Let me share something powerful with you about energy. Every time you think about going back, every time you check their social media, every time you rehearse old conversations in your head, you're sending your energy backward, and energy flows where tension goes. While you're pouring your energy into what was, you're literally draining it from what could be. You know what's fascinating about human nature? We often mistake familiarity for fate. We think because someone keeps coming back into our life, it must mean something profound. But sometimes the only thing it means is that we haven't learned to close the door. We leave it cracked open, just enough for old habits to slip back in. The person you become when you finally stop going back, they're amazing. They're stronger than you can imagine right now. They have a peace you can't even conceive of in this moment. But you'll never meet them if you keep resurrecting your past self. Think about the message you're sending to the universe when you finally stay away. You're declaring, I am ready for what's next. I am prepared for my blessing. I am worthy of something new. And the universe responds to that energy with opportunities you couldn't see when your eyes were always looking backward. Let me tell you about divine timing. Sometimes relationships end not because anyone did anything wrong, but because their purpose in your life is complete. Just like certain plants can only grow in specific seasons, certain relationships are meant for specific seasons of your growth. When you keep trying to extend their season, you're disrupting the natural order of your own evolution. Every moment you spend trying to resurrect a dead relationship is a moment stolen from the living relationship waiting to find you. Every ounce of emotional energy you pour into what was his energy diverted from what could be. It's like trying to drive a car while staring in the rearview mirror. You'll never see the open road ahead. Here's what happens when you truly finally let go. Your energy shifts. Your vibration changes. You start attracting different experiences, different opportunities, different people. It's not magic. When you stop giving your power away to the past, you have more power available for your present and future. You might be thinking, but what about all the good memories? Let me tell you something about memories. They're meant to be honored, not lived in. They're like photographs in an album, precious reminders of where you've been, but not a map of where you're going. You can appreciate the beautiful moments without trying to recreate them. The most profound growth often happens in the space between relationships. In those moments when you're truly alone, truly facing yourself, that's when you discover who you are without the reflection of someone else's expectations. That's when you learn to be enough for yourself. Every time you feel the urge to reach out to them, reach in instead. Ask yourself, What am I really seeking in this moment? What void am I trying to fill? What fear am I trying to quiet? The answers will reveal more about you than any conversation with them ever could. Let me share something about worthiness. Your worth isn't determined by someone's ability to see it. Your value doesn't increase when someone comes back, and it doesn't decrease when they leave. Your worth is intrinsic, constant. The only variable is your willingness to acknowledge it. Think about the example you're setting for everyone watching your journey. Every time you choose yourself, you're showing others it's possible. Every time you stay away from what diminishes you, you're giving someone else permission to do the same. Your healing isn't just about you. It's about breaking generational patterns of settling for less. The quality of your life is directly proportional to the quality of relationship you have with yourself. When you keep going back to someone who doesn't honor your growth, you're breaking trust with the most important person in your life. You're telling yourself that your peace, your progress, your evolution isn't as important as the temporary comfort of familiarity. Here's what happens in the space after you truly let go. First comes the silence. Then comes the sadness. Then comes the solitude. And then just when you think you can't take it anymore, comes the strength. It rises up from somewhere deep inside you, from a place you didn't even know existed. And once you find that strength, you realize it was worth everything you went through to get there. You're not just healing a broken relationship. You're healing your relationship with yourself. You're learning to trust your intuition again. You're remembering how to hear your own voice without the static of someone else's expectations. You're reclaiming your right to choose yourself over and over again. Remember this. The same power that pulls you back to what's familiar can be redirected to pull you forward into what's possible. It's all about where you point that energy. Every time you resist the urge to go back, you're building new neural pathways. You're literally rewiring your brain to expect better, to demand more, to seek growth over comfort. There's something profound that happens when you start treating yourself like someone you love. When you begin making decisions not from a place of lack or loneliness, but from a place of self-respect and dignity, your entire world shifts. The way people treat you changes. The opportunities that come your way transform. But it all starts with that decision, the decision to stop being a visitor in your own life. Let me tell you about the power of empty spaces. In music, they call them rests, those moments of silence between the notes that give the melody its meaning. The space after a relationship ends is like that. It's not empty because something's missing. It's empty because something's about to be created. But here's the key. You have to resist the urge to fill that space with old patterns, old relationships, old ways of being. Think about what actually happens when you go back. Not what you hope will happen, not what you imagine might be different this time, but what actually happens. Isn't it interesting how the same patterns emerge? The same conversations play out, the same hurts resurface. That's not coincidence. That's confirmation. Confirmation that growth doesn't happen by repeating old patterns. It happens by creating new ones. You know what's remarkable about human beings? Our capacity for hope. It's beautiful, really. But sometimes that very hope becomes our obstacle. We hope so hard for change that we ignore the evidence of stagnation. We hope so desperately for transformation that we overlook the reality of repetition. True hope isn't about wishing for someone else to change. It's about believing in your own capacity to create something new. Let me share something about divine discontent. That restlessness you feel, that nagging sense that you're meant for more, that's not your enemy, it's your ally. It's your soul speaking to you in the only language it knows, the language of uncomfortable truth. When you go back to old relationships, you're not just ignoring that voice. You're teaching it to be quiet. Here's what nobody tells you about staying away. It's not about being strong enough to resist temptation. It's about becoming so aligned with your own worth that going back isn't even tempting anymore. It's about evolving beyond the person who found comfort in chaos, who mistook familiar pain for love. It's every time you've walked away before. It wasn't a failure. It was practice. Practice for this moment when you finally walk away for good. Every time you went back wasn't a mistake. It was preparation. Preparation for this moment when you finally understand that staying away isn't about punishing them. It's about honoring yourself. When you understand something crucial about energy. When you keep engaging with past relationships, whether through contact, or through thought, through social media, you're creating an energetic loop. You're literally tying yourself to old energy patterns. Breaking free isn't just about physical distance. It's about energetic release. Let me tell you about the power of decision, not the kind of decision you make with your mind, but the kind you make with your soul. The kind that rises up from your core and changes everything. When you make that kind of decision to stay away, the universe conspires to support you. Doors close, bridges burn, and new paths appear, not by chance, but by design. Think about the story you want to tell 5 years from now. You want it to be a story of how you kept trying to make something work that was fundamentally broken? Or do you want it to be a story of how you found the courage to walk away and discovered something magnificent waiting for you on the other side? Here's what happens when you truly commit to your own growth. The very things that used to trigger you to go back become signposts pointing you forward. That loneliness that used to send you running back, it becomes an invitation to deepen your relationship with yourself. That fear of missing out, it transforms into excitement about what's possible. The interesting thing about healing is that it doesn't happen in the past. You can't heal by going back to the place where you were hurt, expecting different results. Healing happens in the present moment, in the choices you make right now, in the boundaries you set and maintain, in the self-respect you cultivate. There are not walls to keep others out. There are guidelines to keep you true to yourself. Every time you maintain a boundary with a past relationship, you're not just saying no to them, you're saying yes to yourself, yes to your growth, yes to your peace, yes to your potential. You know what's fascinating about human nature? We often confuse love with attachment. We think because we can't let go, it must be love, but real love, the kind that serves your highest good, it doesn't require you to silence your inner wisdom. It doesn't demand that you settle for less than you deserve. The relationship you have with yourself is the foundation for every other relationship in your life. When you keep going back to something that undermines that foundation, you're not just compromising one relationship. You're compromising all of them. You're setting a precedent for what you'll accept, not just from one person, but from everyone. Here's what no one tells you about staying away. The strength doesn't come from the initial decision to leave. It comes from the 1,000 tiny decisions you make every day to stay away. Each time you resist the urge to check their social media, each time you decline to respond to their message, each time you choose yourself, that's where the real power lies. Think about the energy you've been putting into trying to make wrong relationships, right? What if you put that same energy into making your relationship with yourself unshakable? What if you invested that same dedication, that same persistence, that same hope into your own growth? There comes a moment in every journey of transformation when you realize that the person you're becoming requires you to release who you've been. That moment isn't just about letting go of a relationship. It's about embracing a new vision of yourself, a vision that's bigger than your past, stronger than your fears, and more powerful than your old patterns. Let me share something profound about the nature of change. Real change doesn't happen when you're comfortable. It happens when you're willing to be uncomfortable long enough for new patterns to take root. When you keep going back to old relationships, you're choosing the comfort of familiar pain over the discomfort of potential growth. Think about the message your soul has been trying to send you. Those sleepless nights, that nagging feeling in your gut, that quiet voice that whispers there must be more than this. That's not doubt. That's direction. That's your inner wisdom trying to guide you toward what you're truly meant for. Here's what happens when you finally honor that wisdom. The universe starts speaking to you in signs you can't ignore. Doors that used to open start staying closed. Paths that used to seem clear become obscured. Not because you're being punished, but because you're being redirected towards something better. You need to understand something fundamental about your journey. Every time you've gone back, you weren't failing. You were learning. Every time you tried again, you weren't weak. You were gathering evidence. Evidence that you now need to use to make a different choice. The kind of choice that changes everything. Let me tell you about the power of complete endings. When you truly end something, not with anger, not with bitterness, But with complete acceptance, you create space for complete beginnings. But here's the can't have a complete beginning while you're still entertaining incomplete endings. Consider this truth about your worth. It's not something that increases when someone comes back to you or decreases when they leave. Your worth is constant, unchanging, intrinsic to who you are. The only variable is your willingness to live in alignment with that truth. Here's what nobody tells you about the aftermath of staying away. Yes, there will be moments of doubt. Yes, there will be times when loneliness feels like a physical weight on your chest. But there will also be moments of such pure, crystal clear certainty that you'll wonder how you ever questioned your decision. Think about the legacy you're creating. Every time you choose your growth over familiar comfort, you're not just changing your own life, you're changing the lives of everyone watching. You're showing others what's possible. You're breaking patterns that might have existed for generations. Something powerful about divine timing. Sometimes relationships end not because anyone did anything wrong, but because their purpose has been fulfilled. Just like a flower doesn't mourn the passing of spring. You don't need to mourn the ending of something that has served its purpose in your life. You know what's remarkable about human resilience? It's not just about bouncing back. It's about bouncing forward. Every time you resist the urge to go back, you're not just maintaining distance from what hurt you, you're moving closer to what will heal you. It happens in the space between letting go and moving on. You start to remember who you were before the compromises, before the doubt, before you started making yourself smaller to fit someone else's expectations. And that remembering, that's not nostalgia, it's resurrection. It doesn't come from one final conversation. It doesn't come from understanding why things happened the way they did. Real closure comes from accepting that you don't need to understand everything to move forward. It comes from making peace with unanswered questions. About the power of your decisions. Every time you choose not to go back, you're not just making a decision about a relationship, you're making a declaration about your worth. You're setting a new standard for what you'll accept in your life. And that standard becomes your destiny. Think about the energy you've been carrying. The weight of past promises, old dreams, unmet expectations. What if today was the day you set that burden down? What if today was the day you decided that your peace is more important than their comfort? Your growth more valuable than their familiarity? Here's what I know with absolute certainty. The person you become when you finally stop going back is someone you haven't even met yet. They're stronger than you can imagine, more peaceful than you can conceive, more fulfilled than you can currently understand. But you'll never meet them if you keep returning to who you used to be. As we come to the close of our time together, I want you to understand something vital. This moment right now is a turning point. Not because I'm telling you it is, but because you're ready to make it one. You're ready to stop treating yourself like a backup plan. Ready to stop being an option in someone else's story and start being the main character in your own. The same energy that pulls you back can propel you forward. It's all about where you direct it. Every time you feel that magnetic pull toward the past, redirect it toward your future. Let it fuel your growth, power your transformation, energize your evolution. Your story doesn't end with letting go. That's just the beginning. Your story continues with every choice you make to stay away, every decision to honor your worth, every moment you choose growth over comfort. And that story, it's going to be magnificent. As you leave here today, carry this truth with you. You are not defined by the relationships you've had, the times you've gone back, or the patterns you've repeated. You are defined by the courage it takes to finally say, no more. I choose me. I choose my growth. I choose my future. The time has come to close the door on what was. Turn the key on what is and step boldly into what will be. Not because you hate what's behind you, but because you love what's ahead of you more. Not because you're afraid of going back, but because you're excited about moving forward. Your new chapter begins now. Write it with courage. Write it with conviction. Write it with the unwavering knowledge that you deserve every beautiful thing that's coming your way. The past has served its purpose. It's taught you what you needed to learn. Now it's time to use those lessons not as a reason to return, but as fuel to soar. Go forth now, not in fear of what you're leaving behind, but in anticipation of what you're stepping into. Your future self is waiting, and they're smiling because they know This is the moment everything changes. This is the moment you finally break free.